CSS Grid and Flexbox were game changers in front-end development and web design when they first came out. Now it's like the de facto way of laying out web pages. But over the years, there was one thing that web developers found very tricky to do. That was how to animate changes in your Flexbox or CSS Grid layout, i.e. when you add or remove a grid item. As you can see on the screen, I'm adding, removing, and shuffling things around, and you can see that there is a lot of position changes and dimension changes going on, and that's how complex it is. Part of the problem was that browsers don't properly support layout changes. Layout changes are tricky because it involves complex calculations to do the rendering. In React.js, frame of motion is a game changer when it comes to animating these complex layouts, and it does it with a nice programming API. That means you don't have to jump through hoops with JavaScript and CSS. Hello there, in this video I will take you through the steps to build this animated contact list demo using React.js and frame of motion. This is a CSS grid layout of contact cards arranged in a multi-dimensional grid. It is also responsive. As the number of cards that increase or decrease, you will see the cards adapt to the width. Now I've got this add, remove and shuffle buttons here, and if I add items to the grid, it will animate in, and if I remove things, it will animate out, and you can see the other cards shifting around to fill in that space. And I can just add a few cards here and show you the shuffle feature, so it will shuffle around, and this could be something like a filter or a reorder functionality. And if I make the browser smaller, it will resize, as you can see here. And also if I remove all the items, and if I've only got like 2 items, it will be responsive. And if there's 1 item, it will fill the whole width. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to add the code for the add, remove, and shuffle functionality so that you can test the animation for the different scenarios. Also, I'm going to be covering the Flexbox and CSS grid layout animation, and also how to trigger the animation using inIssue and animate properties. And also how to apply basic animations like scaling, opacity, rotate, and spring animations. And you will also learn how to use the layout property to animate items when they are added to the grid. And also you're going to be using the animate presence property to animate things when they are removed from the grid layout. You can also watch my previous video on frame of motion, how to build a complex staggered and on-scroll animation UI. The link will be in the comment section. So if you like videos like this, please subscribe to my channel, and let's start. I'm in VS Code and I've already run create React app to set up a basic React app. I've also deleted all the unnecessary files, and so all I have is the bare minimum to get me started. So I've got the index.js, index.css, app.js, and app.css, and also got a file called contact-list.js. Now, basically what this is an array of objects that contains our contact information. So I've got the image, name, email, and ID, and I'll come back to this later. In our app.js, I have some basic code set up that renders a very simple contact list with no animation and interaction buttons, as you can see here. So if I quickly inspect the markup, I can quickly show you that I've got a heading, a h1 contact list heading there, and I've got a UL element with a class name wrapper, and within there I've got list items, which is actually the contact cards. So these are the contact cards. Okay, so within each card I've got an image and then some details as well. So that's the markup. So back to our app.js. I've got at the top I'm importing app.css, and then I'm importing the contact list as I showed you earlier, which is contact list.js, and this is the actual file that has the contact details. So we're doing an export constant and we're calling it contact list, and it's an array of 3 objects, and each object has an image, name, and email and ID. Now the image is a URL. You can probably replace this with a link from Unsplash or somewhere else. So I'm just using these images from my GitHub, so I'll leave the link in the comment section. Now, I just want to point out that the ID is very important in our animation because we need something unique to keep track of the animation. So I just want you to know that. Going back to our app.js, I'm also importing useState from React and also motion and animate presence from Frame Motion. Now, I've already installed Frame Motion, so if you haven't, you need to go to create a new terminal and type in npm install framer-motion. So I've already run this, so you need to run that to continue. Okay, so going back. And in our app function, we're rendering our contact list, and we got a h1 title there, and we got a UL element as I showed you earlier, which has got a class name of wrapper, and then we're using the contact list that we imported from there. We're mapping through, and we're rendering each card. Okay, and that's what it's doing there. So as a list item, so each list item is a card, and it has a content, and within there we've got an image, and we've got some details, and it's pulling the details from the contact list. Okay, as you can see here. Okay, now that you have an idea of how the HTML markup is structured, we can have a look at the app.css for the styling. Okay, so in the app.css, if I go at the top, I got some reset styles for the HTML element and the body element, and a general sort of box sizing and margin 0. So just resetting the, these to 0 for all elements. Okay, so and in the body, I've got centering the content here. Having a display flex and align item center, etc. And the contact list is quite important. That's what we're going to be animating. So so as you remember in the markup, I've got a wrapper, which is a UL element, and that is a flex and it's a flex layout, and we've got flex direction as column 0. So all we're doing is the items in the UL, we're gonna reverse it. So the new things are going to be come at the top, and the older things will come at the bottom. So so when you're rendering, by default you have the oldest first, and then the newest at the bottom. So we're just for rearranging that order there. And I got the width as using the clamp function. So so this just makes this is sort of one line code to make the wrapper responsive. So basically ideally we want like 60 view width, but if it's less than 360 we want to fix it to 360. If it's higher than 600 pixels we want to fix it to 600, so it doesn't go beyond these limits. Okay, so that's what the clamp is doing there. Okay, then we got each card will have some width of 100%. It's got a fixed height, and we have overflows hidden, and we've got some border radius and stuff like that. And then we got some styling for the content, and basically we got 2 items in the content, and we're just sort of doing a little flex layout there with direction row. Okay, and we got this image style in there, and all we're doing is we're having a sort of a height and width of 100 pixels, and we're giving it a border. We're giving it a border radius of 50%, so it's a circle, and we're doing an object fit cover, so it's nicely resized. So then we've got the card details there, and we've got some button style in there. So it's just sort of general button. Just gonna go back to the wrapper again, and I mentioned that it's a flex configuration, but later on I'll be changing this into a CSS grid. So we're going to be having sort of a multi-column, multi-row configuration. So that's going to be interesting. So start off with, I'm going to start off with a flex, then I'm going to change it to CSS grid later on. Now going back to that app.js, we're going to be adding some buttons now. So these buttons will be have functions to add, remove, and shuffle. So we're going to have 3 buttons: add, remove, and shuffle. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the markup here. So I'm going to have a div, and then within there I'm going to have 3 buttons. Oops, and So I'm going to have a div, and then within there I'm going to have 3 buttons, and so I'm going to have a div, and then within there I'm going to have 3 buttons, and btn and btn. Okay, and these buttons will be add, remove, and shuffle. Okay, so each button we're gonna bind it with an on-click function, which is equal to, okay. So so we're gonna have an add, remove, and shuffle. Okay, so we don't have these functions, so we're going to add those functions there. So we're going to just have a constant, and it's going to be add is equal to, we're going to have an arrow function. Okay, and for the time being, we're just going to say console.log, and we're going to say add. Okay, so this will handle the add function. So we're going to have 2 more, and this is going to be the remove function, and this is going to be shuffle function. Okay, so add, remove, and shuffle. Okay, so we're just laying out our sort of a structure of our code for handling these functionality. So when you click on the add, you should console.log out add, and when you click on remove button, it will console.log out remove, same for shuffle. So we save this, we go to our browser. Okay, so we got the buttons there. Okay, so by inspect, go to console.log, click on add, so add appears there, remove appears there, and shuffle. So these buttons are working. So we don't have to worry about this, we will worry about these errors later. So going back. Okay, now we're going to test out our animation using frame of motion. So what we're going to do is we're going to animate the cards. Okay, so it's going to be, we're going to apply it to the list item with the class name card. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is we need to prefix the list item with a motion. So it's motion dot, and we also are going to change the end tag for that as well to match it, motion dot li. Okay, so then we're going to add some properties to this tag. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the key is equal to it's going to be item dot key, item dot id, sorry. So I can just go back to the contact list, and remember we've got image, name, email, and id. So that's what we're indicating here. So it's the item ID. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to have an initial animation state. Okay, so it's just going to be initial, and it's going to equal to. So now we have to decide what we're going to animate. Okay, so we're going to say scale is 0. Okay, so it's going to start off with 0, then it's going to grow into its full size. So so the end state, which is going to be animate, is equal to it's double curly brackets, remember that, and in there we're going to say scale equals 1. Okay, so what we're saying is we're going to start the card's going to have an initial scale of 0, then it's going to animate to the full size. Okay, so if I save that, So if we go to the browser and test the animation, we'll refresh. So you can see it sort of scales up and then it sort of to its normal size. So it starts from sort of a 0 scale and then it scales up. So that animation is working. It's just that it does it a bit quickly. Now we can also add some fancy stuff to this as well. So if I go to the animate property, and we can add in extra properties, values. Okay, so I can add in a transition, and that will have a you can put a delay in there for 0.5 seconds, and then also give it type spring. Okay, so it has a sort of a bouncy effect to it. So it's double quotes spring. Okay, so I saved it. Now if I go to the browser, you can see that it sort of comes in slowly now, and it sort of bounces. There's a little bounce at the end, as you can see here. So this will run every time you start your application on the first render. So you can add effects for delay and springy effects there, okay, under the transition. So this is a basic configuration. That's all you need. You just need to prefix it with motion and add these values, initial and animate. So animate will be the ending animation state. So whenever you re-render, it will this animation will kick in. If you want to disable, if you don't want it to render on the first mount, then there's an option with animate presence that I'll cover that later. Okay, so for the time being, this is the basic thing that you need to get up and running with frame of motion. Next, we are going to add a functionality to add a new contact to our contact list. So let's add some code to add a new contact. So if I go back to the top, where I've added all the functionality for the buttons for the add, remove, and shuffle, now I'm going to concentrate on the add. So I'm going to just make some space there, and then just make some space there as well. And just going to paste something here, so we know it's just a comment. So we're going to be adding a new contact to a contact list array state value. So we're going to need a state value for this. So at the top, I'm just going to say constant, and I'm going to say open close square brackets, and we're going to call it contacts, and it's contact, sorry. And we're going to say set contacts, okay, which is going to equal to, we're going to say use state, and we're going to set it to what we've contact list. Okay, so contact list. Okay, so we got a state value for that now. So in our add function, what we're going to do is we're just going to say set contacts and open close brackets, and here we're gonna have open close square brackets, and within there we're gonna say dot dot dot. We're gonna use the spread operator to on the contact list, okay, and then we're gonna say comma. So just to recap, I'm using the spread operator here to get the current contact list, and after the comma, I'm going to insert a new object for a new contact. Okay, so the best way to do that is if I go to the contact list file. Okay, so and remember we're initializing with 3 objects. So what we can do is we can just carefully copy that. Any one of these objects, just copy the everything between the curly brackets, including the curly brackets as well. So I'm just going to copy this one, and I'm just going to paste it after that comma. Okay, and so let me just put some space in there so that we know. Okay, so it looks good. Okay, so all we're doing is we're creating a new object from the existing one. So what we're going to do is we need a unique ID here, and we can also change the name, or or just say new person, and I just say new person here, new person. Okay, and for the ID. For the ID, what I'm going to do is we're going to generate a random number. Now, this is not the correct way to do it, but for this demo, we need a sort of a unique ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say math dot floor, and then open close brackets, and within there I'm going to say math dot random. Okay, and then we're gonna it's open close brackets again. Okay, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say times by 2000. Okay, so what this will do is it will generate a random number between 0 and 2000. Okay, and it's going to be a whole number. So the floor just means that because this will have values of with decimal points, so floor just makes it any whole integer number. So that's what we're doing here. Let me just minimize this. Okay, so I've added I've set the contacts, okay, so as a state value. Okay, now I need to go back to our JSX, and we were referring to contact list, okay, initially. So we're just gonna change it to our state value, which is contacts. So I need to change the reference there, contacts, and also it should be okay. So if I save that and check the browser, refresh, okay. Okay, so if I add, okay, so it's not adding correctly. It's just sort of going through a cycle. It's not really adding the new one. It's just repeating adding one, but it's then it's taking it away and adding it again. So I'm going to go back to the code. Now I spotted what it was. The problem was that I'm spreading the contact list. Now I'm using the state variable now because I've set it to the state there. So I need to be using the contact state value. So I'm going to be spreading the contacts. So that's the correction that you need to make. So just make it to contacts instead of contact list. Okay, so if I go back to the browser and refresh, okay, now if I add it, okay, so it's adding, and it's adding the new person. So you can see here that it's gonna go on forever adding a new one. Okay, so it's just that we got the same picture, and but we added a different name and email. So this add thing works. So if I refresh, and as you can see, when you add a new one, these items are not animating. So it just sort of, there's a sharp movement, and then this comes in. Okay, so that's what we're gonna fix next. We're gonna make it smooth. We're gonna get everything to move smoothly down, and this will animate in slowly. Now what's happening is that when we add a new item, the other items get pushed down. Now it is getting pushed down suddenly and not in a smooth animated way. So to fix this, we have to attach a layout property to the list item, so that when it is being pushed to a new location, it will be aware of it, and hence an animation will be applied to it. So to do that, all we need to do is we need to go back to our JSX, and in the list item element, we just need to add a new property called a layout, and that's all we need to do. Okay, so remember it's another property, it's not part of the animate. Okay, so if I save this and then go back to the browser, okay, now watch carefully. You can see it's moved down gracefully rather than jagged motion. So there you go. Okay, so I can just demonstrate without it. So if I take that out, I saved it and refresh, and you see this sudden jumpy movement there. See, it's jumping now. So if I go back and add it back in, and refresh, now it's adding it smooth again. All right. So that's all we needed to do. So all these elements will have a layout property, because we're doing we're mapping the context. So it will be applied to every list item. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add the remove functionality and see how our UI is going to render after we remove items. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our function section where I've added the remove functionality. Okay, so I'm just going to make some space there, and I'm just going to make some space there as well, and there. Let's do some tabs there. Okay, so going to paste a little comment there. So I'm going to remove a contact from the contact state value. So it's going to be remove a random contact from the contact state value. Okay, so and then what we're going to do is we're going to remove a random item. So we need to reference a random index in our contacts list. Okay, so so what we're going to do is we're going to say let I equals, and we're going to generate a random number. So I'm going to use this random function that I used earlier, the math floor function. Just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. Now that was creating a random number between 2000. So I'm going to just change that 2000 to, I'm going to say contacts dot length. Okay. So what it's doing is it's generating a number between 0 and the contact's length. So depending on how many items we got in our contacts list, it's going to use that number to generate the random number. Then we're going to use that index to remove the item. So on the next line, I'm going to say contacts, and we're going to use a splice command. Okay, and open close brackets, and so we're going to reference the I item, which is the random item. Okay, and we're going to remove inclusive of that, so one item inclusive of that. Okay, so this will update the contacts with after it's removed the random item that we've indicated here. Okay, the I. And then on the next line, we're going to say set contacts, and open close brackets, and open close square brackets, square brackets. Okay, and then we're going to say we're going to use the spread operator, 3 dots, and I'm going to say contacts. So now it will update with a new contact because we removed one item there. Okay, and that's all we need to do here. So if I do save and I go to our browser, do a refresh, and if I add or remove, so it's removing it, so it's adding it and removing it. Now the thing is, when it removes, there's no animation. So when you add it, it sort of animates and scales up and bounces. When you remove, it just sort of disappears. It's a sudden disappearance. Okay, so we're going to add the animation now on exit when things are removed. To animate things when we remove items from our contact list, we need to do two things. We need to add a wrapper called animate presence, and we also need to add an extra property on the actual list item called exit, and it's similar to animate property and initial property. So it just gives you we're just giving it another animation settings for when it exits. So we need to animate. So first of all, we're going to talk about animate presence. And now we need to use this wrapper so that when things are removed, the components know that it's about to be removed. Now React lacks any sort of lifecycle methods to notify components that they're about to be removed, so it doesn't give them time to animate out. So this wrapper will give them time to animate out and carry out their exit animations. So to do that, first we need to just add it under the UL wrapper. So we're going to say animate presence, and we're going to put the end tag. So we say cut that, and we're going to put the end tag just before the end tag for the UL. Okay, so this will allow it to detect when things are removed. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is we need to add a property here called exit. Okay, so we can just copy that and then just just paste that there, and we'll just call it exit. Okay, and now so this is similar to this, but this is going to run on exit. So we're just going to say something like instead of scale, we're going to say rotate 500. Okay, and we leave that and see what happens. Okay, so save that, go to browser, do a refresh. Okay, now if I do remove, sort of rotates and goes out. So there you go. There you go. So we just put it to something sensible now. Okay, so that's working. So we just put it to something like opacity to 0. So it's going to fade out, and I don't think we need a spring, and you can put a delay in there. So if now when you add it, it will bounce in. When you remove it, it sort of fades out, and there you go. So if I remove it, it sort of fades out, and then the others animate in, filling in the space, as you can see here. So that's how you animate on when you remove things. Okay, now we get to the fun part. We're going to be turning this flex layout into a CSS grid layout. Okay, so I'm going to go to the app.css. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the wrapper where we got the configuration for the flex layout. Okay, so if you want sort of simple layouts with a single column and single row, then flex is ideal. But if you want to have a layout with a more complex sort of multi-dimensional layout where you've got multiple columns and multiple rows, then you have to be using a CSS grid. Now Flex has its advantages. For instance, you can do this column reverse like this with one line of code. In CSS Grid is much more complex, so we won't be doing the column reverse with CSS Grid. Okay, so first thing what I'm going to do is to turn this into a CSS Grid. We need to change the display to grid. So from Flex, I'm going to change it to a grid. Okay, then I'm going to comment this out. Don't need that. Okay, and then we're going to define our CSS Grid dimensions using the grid template columns. Okay, so it's grid template columns. Okay, and then we're gonna use the repeat function to define a sort of an algorithm to how to lay out our grid. So we're going to say repeat, and within repeat we're going to have two arguments. Now the first argument is going to be auto fit. Okay, and the second argument is a min-max value. Min-max. In the min-max function, we're going to have a minimum value of 260 px and then 1 fr as the maximum value, 1 fr. So basically what I'm saying here is I want the minimum value of 260, but it can also if there's enough space, then it will grow into 1 fr. So if there's 10 items and then there's there's still space, then it will try to be 260, but if there's more space, then it will grow into whatever size that it fits into that row. But this 260 is sort of the minimum, so it will try and fill everything up with 260. Otherwise, if there's more space within, then it will fill it up with, it will stretch it out basically. So this is a good one line of code that you can use and sort of just play around with the numbers. So it's a little bit tricky to understand, but this is how it works. So if I go to the browser now and I'll take that to full screen. Okay, so I got two columns there, so I can sort of adjust that. I can increase the width so that I can fit more of these 260 size cards. Okay, so if I increase it to 900, and now I've got sort of 3 columns there, and also so I can also add some gaps to this. I can say gap of 10 pixels. Okay, so maximize it, so I've got gaps now. So if I add more cards to this, it fits in nicely. Okay, so and if I remove things, it's going to animate nicely as well. So as you can see here, so it's shifting around when you remove things. So as you can see here, and if I got one row and I remove something, it sort of grows into that, and that's the grid column template column configuration doing that. So that's what the 1 fr is doing. So if it's just one item, then it will expand to that available space. Okay, so that's how you do CSS Grid, and that's how the animation, there's no difference to it. It will animate regardless of if it's Flex or CSS Grid. So let me just, so it's shifting around when you remove random items. Okay, finally I'm going to add the shuffle function now. So I'm going to go back to the app.js main code, and I'm going to go to the top section where I've got the shuffle function laid out already. So I'm just going to make some space there again, and okay, and then I'm just going to paste some code in here quickly. All right. Oops. Okay, so this new piece of code that I've just pasted in. So I'm just going to quickly go through this because I'm not going to spend too much time. Okay, what it's doing is it's getting the contacts and it's copying onto another shuffled array, and then it's set the contacts state to the new shuffled array. So so in this line, I'm just saying, create a shuffled constant, and it's an array, it's an empty array, and then I've got a while loop. Basically, what it's doing is it's getting a random item from contacts, and it's pushing it onto the shuffled array. Then it's deleting it from the contacts array. So every time it loops through, there's one less contact, and it's removing a random contact from there, and then it's copying it onto the shuffled. So that's what that while loop is doing. And then I'm just setting the state to set contacts, and setting it with a shuffled array. Okay, and so if I save this and go to the browser, okay, so now our shuffled button should work. There you go. So if I add more cards to it and do a shuffle, there you go. So shuffle is working. So it's randomly shuffling it around. Okay, so I can remove things and it animates nicely, and I can add things and it's animated nicely, and I can shuffle things around. So I hope you like this video, and if you like this sort of content, please subscribe and join me in the next video.